Hello viewers, and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be working on something Kashmir. We are going to be making a fish Chetinad, and it's a very simple recipe, as you can be able to see from the few ingredients on the counter. But before we get to the process of preparing it, we'll begin by introducing the ingredients before us. So from the very front, we're going to be working with about a tablespoon of dried parsley, 1 teaspoon of paprika and cayenne powder mixed. We're also going to be using unsalted butter, about 30 grams. We're also going to be using some cumin powder, about 1.5 teaspoons, about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt. You'll also require 1 imported lemon and a handful of fresh coriander, 1 packet of instant noodles, about 2 pieces of tilapia fish that's been cleaned and degutted. You're also going to require some oil for cooking and some paprika powder. So we're going to start off the show very shortly, but before we do so, do take this chance to freshen up, and we'll see you after a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who missed out on the introduction, today we're making a fish Chetinad. This is originally a Kashmir oriented recipe, so it's a very spicy one indeed, and it's a very simple technique. It actually just entails a little bit of the use of paprika powder and a little bit of frying. So one particular thing to mention before we begin, also very important to mention, always use your fish fresh if you can. If you're going to be working with frozen fish, you should actually take time to thaw it in the fridge overnight, allowing it to actually be ready for frying the following day. Another thing to also make sure from your fishmongers is when you buy whole fish, be sure to have it scaled, because the scales will actually be very hard to consume, and remember, they actually don't cook. So you may actually want to make sure these are removed before you actually purchase your fish. And last but finally, for this particular recipe, you may want to use whole fish, because for this particular technique, it only requires a bit of frying. And for the particular authenticity of the dish, you may actually want to use fish that's still got the skin on. So before we begin, we're going to start off a very simple process of making our noodles. So we already have a pot boiling on the side. To that, we're going to be pouring into this bowl, and all you're going to require is your noodles in the bowl. Now to that, we're going to add a small pinch of some cumin powder, small pinch of some black pepper powder, and a small pinch of salt. Remember, this particularly aid in seasoning your noodles right between the process of soaking them up till the point of draining, and it also gives it a nice beautiful aroma. But just to bring a little life to it, I always like to insist it's not really applicable or pleasant to actually have a lot of white ingredients on your plate. So we're going to just spice it up a little bit and add a small teaspoon of turmeric powder. Remember, this only gives it a bit of color, and you'll actually be able to see the effects of it much later. So to begin with, we're going to add our hot pot of water into our bowl. And we're going to allow that to sit right behind our station here for about another 5 to 6 minutes until completely soaked, and we'll proceed to drain. But while we do so, we're going to also be seasoning our fish. So very important to mention, and right about the time when you're ready to marinate your fish, very important to remember that you should actually season your ingredients really well. Remember, the seasoning will carry right through into the fish while it absorbs, and it is very crucial that you get it right the first time. So we're going to start off very simply by adding about 1 teaspoon of some paprika powder to our bowl. To that, we'll proceed to add a small dash of oil. Add to that also a small pinch of salt, Bit of black pepper powder just for the kick. Add also about a teaspoon of cumin powder and a small pinch of cayenne for heat. And last but finally, your dried oregano. Proceed to mix that in your bowl. And once combined, proceed to grab your lemon. Very easy, important, handy tip before you squeeze your lemon. Very easily just roll it on the board. This allows for your lemon to release all the juices and actually makes it easier to get every bit of juice out, even from the pulp. And now proceed to slice halfway. And while holding a strainer over your bowl, and proceed to squeeze your lemon completely until you get almost all the juices out. And also a handy tip I can also share with you, if you're actually having a difficulty in squeezing a lemon, also a very handy tip is grab something else in your other hand and lift your hand up and proceed to squeeze. And what this does is it actually tightens the grip on your elbow on the right hand side, and you actually manage to squeeze as much juice as you can from the lemon. Alternative to that, you can actually squeeze your juice, you can actually soak your lemons overnight in some water and squeeze in the morning. It will also allow for you to get a nice beautiful dash of lemon juice. Right, once done, proceed to discard the seeds and proceed to mix your ingredients once more. Right, once that's combined, proceed to grab your pair of tongs and very simply add your pieces of tilapia into the bowl. Of course, always making sure to drain your fish before you do so. That way you actually avoid contaminating your mixture with any blood or any of the juices from the fish. And very simply mix through, tossing at least 8 to 9 times using a spoon and not your hands. Remember, your hands do carry bacteria. It is very simple to poison your food, or rather clean the bacteria from your fingertips with the lemon juice and pass it on to your fish. So be sure to mix that with a spoon, or using if you're using your hands, be sure to work with a pair of gloves. Right, so simple as that. We're going to allow that to sit in room temperature for anywhere between 4 to 5 minutes. Just enough time to allow you to heat up your pan. Now we're going to allow that to heat up, and while we do so, bring your attention back to the noodles that we soaked a little earlier, and using a pasta spoon, proceed to break up the noodles. And once they're completely softened, very easy hint, proceed to use your same sieve and very simply pour your noodles over. Return the sieve over your bowl and allow it to sit for anywhere between 3 to 4 seconds. That should allow for the water to completely drain. And now bring your attention back to your pan. To a hot pan, add about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of some cooking oil. And proceed to grab your cumin powder and your butter first. Now remember something particular with fish. If you're going to be buttering your fish, or rather basting it while cooking, very important that you actually get that beautiful color on your pan first. So you may actually want to dash a little bit more oil to your pan. Swirl your pan around a few times and make sure to cover the base of the pan completely. Some tips as well: when you're using a frying pan, the thinner the base, the better the fry. So be sure to actually look for the thinnest pan, especially if you're going to be frying anything in the same process as this. Something also to mention, if you are thinking of stewing or making that into a curry, you may want to switch to a heavy base pot, because it will allow you to cook it a little faster and may actually avoid the process of overcooking your fish. So very simply, come back to your fish and toss over once more. Always be sure to also scoop a bit of your marinade into the center piece of the fish. Of course, working your spoon through the mid vein and around the gills. And now something also to mention, if you are going to be working with spices, particularly for frying, you may also want to make sure that you do so in a room with quite a bit of air. So very, very important that you have your windows open or your doors open, because it could actually cause quite a bit of a choke. And once your pan is hot and smoky, proceed to cook for the first side, making sure that your piece of fish sits right over a shallow part of the pan with oil. And now you can proceed to scoop the rest of your mixture over your fish. And now at this stage, you're going to allow that to cook for a very, very short time, anywhere between 6 minutes on each side. Remember, this is fish on a bone. It will take quite a bit of time to cook it through, so be sure to cook it low and slow. By low and slow, we mean cooking at, begin the pan by heating it up really, really hot. Allow your pan to smoke with some oil on it, then add your fish, drop your temperature completely and allow it to cook all the way until it's crispy on the first side. Turn it over and turn the heat up once more and allow it to cook low and slow once more, making sure to get an even color on each side. So very, very simple tip as well when basting fish. Always have a nice shallow spoon that you can be able to scoop the oil with. And now before we begin that process, you'll of course need some butter for that. So add that to your pan. Add your cumin powder as well. And just very, very lightly push your fish towards the center of the pan and allow the oil and the butter to pour to one side of the pan, and proceed to mix by running your spoon through the mixture. And once your butter begins to bubble, proceed to tilt your pan sideways, grab hold of some of the butter and proceed to pour over your fish. And what particularly this does is it allows for you to seal the spices over the top, allowing you to get a nice beautiful color once you turn them over. So by this stage you should actually about halfway cooked on the first side. Remember, this needs about 4 turns. So using your pair of tongs, shake very, very lightly on your pan, allowing your fish to detach, and proceed to turn over. And all you do at this point is proceed to do the same thing as before. Proceed to pour your oil over the fish. And you actually are allowed to add a little bit of butter if your pan is completely dry. Just be sure, of course, to always put a reminder to always settle for unsalted butter, especially when frying. Remember, you may also forget that you're using salted butter and actually just proceed to over season your fish. So very importantly, skip to unsalted butter if you're going to be using seasoning, and if not, alternatively use salted butter but skip from the salt for this particular recipe. So we're just going to continue basting that. As I mentioned, cook it low and slow. You can also throw that in the oven, cook it for about 10 minutes, turn it over and cook for another 10 minutes, anywhere between 160 to 180 degrees, paying attention to the fact that fish is white meat, cooks a little faster than chicken. Right, so 3 minutes into the cooking, another third turn. So this should be taking you closer to the last and final. And proceed to do the same as before. Now at this stage we're going to allow the fish to continue cooking and allow it also to seal the flavors right through to the very center. But before we get to the last and final step of the dish, we are going to take a break, clean up our station, and we'll see you after a very short while. Don't touch that dial. We'll see you in a very short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just catching up, we've just been finishing off our beautiful fish Chetinad. We've also finished our noodles and we're right at the last and final step. So very, very simple. Something that always works for me, particularly with pasta or any noodles. A gentle drizzle of oil just before plating. Always actually brings out the best of your pasta or your noodles. Also allows it to avoid sticking to each other. And of course it also gives it a beautiful presentation. So give that a nice quick mix in a small bowl. And a very simple technique to move that to your plate. Press a plate right over the top and turn it over. And you can lift very gently. And that is a particularly very simple way of plating pasta or noodles. And now just to finish this off, we're going to add our star item of the dish, which is a fish. You can place that right over the top. Of course, always exposing the most beautiful side of your fish, so be sure to give it a turn and give the best side up. Simple as that. Now to finish that off, a quick drizzle of some lemon juice right over the top. And be sure to go around each piece at least twice. And to finish your dish off, some fresh sprigs of coriander. So bundle those nice and gently over your fingertips. More than 4 pieces is considered too much, so about 3 or 4 pieces should do. Gently lay those over your fish, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is my simple take on fish Chetinad. I have had fun doing this, and I hope you've also had fun watching. I will also remind you to leave your comments, inquiries, or any particular issues pertaining this episode. We're always more than welcome to hear from you. And for those of you who may have missed out on previous episodes before, remember we also have a YouTube channel, that's BrandPlus TV. You can be able to recap on many other episodes that we have done before this. But until the next episode, I will bid you farewell, hoping that you enjoy your dinner today. And until the next episode, God bless and see you soon.